Good morning and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. Last week we looked at questions people asked Jesus, and this week we've turned the tables to explore questions that Jesus asked people. And frankly, I never expected that there would be so many. There are, in fact, more than 100 times in the Gospels where Jesus asks a question, and one source I saw indicated that there were more than 300. And as I told you yesterday, Jesus' questions to us seem to be different from our questions to him. All too often, Jesus' questions invite us to self-examination, reflection, and change. Today's question is the question that leads to a question. It comes in the midst of one of my favorite stories, the stilling of the storm. Perhaps to understand it best, we need to look at what else has been going on before this story. At the beginning of Matthew 8, Jesus heals a leper, and that's followed by a Roman centurion who has a beloved servant who is ill. And he tells Jesus that all Jesus needs to do is to say the word and the servant would be healed. And he was. Then Jesus goes to Peter's house and heals Peter's mother-in-law. And then the crowds bring many who are sick and possessed by demons to Jesus, and he heals them too. Then Jesus and his disciples got in the boat to go to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. Jesus was tired and fell asleep, and about then a storm rose up. Now I remember being on the Sea of Galilee about 20 years ago, and our guide pointed out to us how the large lake sits in a depression with high bluffs all around, and that meant that unseen storms could and did suddenly appear, and that seems to be the case here. And it must have been a terrible storm, because some of these disciples were skilled fishermen living their whole lives on the Sea of Galilee, and they knew its storms and its ways, and they are afraid too. The way Matthew tells it, and when he got into the boat, his disciples followed him. A windstorm arose on the sea so great that the boat was being swamped by the waves, but he was asleep. And they went and woke him up, saying, "Lord, save us, we are perishing." And he said to them, "Why are you afraid, you of little faiths?" And that's where this question comes home to us, I believe. Here the disciples had spent the whole day looking at the incredible things Jesus did, seeing the hand of God acting among them in Jesus. And yet the instant trouble shows up, their fear takes over. And that might sound familiar to us as we think about all the incredible things Jesus has done in our lives, all the ways God's hand has been active among us, and then our own fears and worries and how they plague us with anxiety and struggles. Restless nights, trembling days, anticipated fears of the unknown future. Sometimes they are all we can see. "Why are you afraid, you of little faith?" Jesus asked them, calling them to a new and deeper trust. Jesus was with them, and they should have been comforted in that. Jesus is with us, and we should be comforted too. This kind of trust is hard. This kind of reliant trust to know that we belong to God, that things are in God's hands, and that God is in control doesn't come easily to us most of the time. We so want to be in charge and in control. Sometimes I ponder that so often we turn to prayer as a last resort rather than the first place we go in times of trouble and fear. We belong to God, and God will never let us go. Well, you know what happened. Jesus woke up and stilled the storm, and the scripture says that there was a dead calm. And that's the thing. In God's presence, the storms of life are stilled, and we find peace. And no storm of life is too big for God. But all this led the disciples to ask a question then. Who is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him? It is Christ the Lord. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.